Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About Tuesday. Today we are talking about independent writing and alternative pencils. In one of our previous sessions, we talked about predictable chart writing as an emergent writing strategy. Today we're going to focus on other writing opportunities for students with complex needs. Just as a reminder, different strategies are used for emergent and conventional literacy learners, although some are the same. You can see that independent writing is something that is used with both groups of students. If you need help determining if your student is emergent or conventional, refer to the 4 questions on the literacy checklist that we referred to in the PD day today. Today's session has a focus on independent writing.
Thanks, Donna, for that lovely intro. So we do know that students who write become better readers. You can't work on one without working on the other. But our students with the most significant disabilities often have the fewest opportunities to learn to write. It is important for our learners to see themselves as capable of conveying a message with print. Writing is communication, and everyone deserves the right to be able to express themselves in as many ways as they can. When students are literate, they can say absolutely anything that they want, and we call this communication autonomy. If our complex students have the ability to write, then we know that they will be able to say anything and that they won't be restricted to the vocabulary that might be programmed into their communication device, say, for example, if they use one. We need to create the same interaction and writing opportunities for our students that we do for all of our other students. We expect that they will learn to write. We actively engage with them. We accept early approximations. We provide a lot of modeling. We attribute meaning to all attempts, and we celebrate their attempts. So it's important for our students with complex needs to also have those opportunities and to have a context for a meaningful response. Because our students may have difficulty communicating, it can be tricky to know what they are writing about. And as a result, as we'll talk about a bit later, we often pair our writing activities with pictures. It's also important that we use systematic and explicit instruction to learn as well, to provide them with day-to-day exposure to writing in purposeful and meaningful contexts. So we need to consider our planned scope and sequence when we're instructing in writing. Students may initially draw, scribble, or choose random letters, but it's important to praise any efforts. We want to create a welcoming, emergent writing community, help them feel confident about being able to write and see themselves as writers. Drawings and scribblings become increasingly letter-like with direct teaching, with time and with experience. That we can see that their choices become more deliberate and also based on their increasing word and sound knowledge and phonological awareness, because we're also working on those skills at the same time. Some students need assistance with being able to express themselves with print. So they may use alternative writing tools, or they may need partner-assisted writing, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail. There really are only 2 prerequisites to becoming a writer, something to write with and something to write on, and the rest is teaching. So as I've already mentioned, students with the most significant disabilities often have the fewest opportunities to write. It is really important, as I've said, for our learners to see themselves as capable of conveying a message with print. We need to presume that they can learn to write. It is also important to create context for meaningful responses by encouraging independent writing. As I said, the writing tools may be different, but students need to be able to generate or actively construct print by selecting or writing letters from the whole alphabet. So we have to make sure that all of the letters of the alphabet are available to them. We also need to teach our students that print has meaning. We need to teach them why people write and what it means to be a writer and how to think like a writer. Copying and tracing are fine motor tasks that do not facilitate the process of writing. It is about forming letters, but it doesn't facilitate that independent writing process. We see a lot of copying and tracing and matching in many classrooms. So these activities are really considered ineffective and decontextualized. So what good is it to be able to put the letters of your name in order if you don't really understand the reason for writing your name? Both emergent and conventional literacy learners need opportunities every day to construct their own writing, as Donna mentioned. Um, Writing improves through experience, and the only way that our students are going to learn to write is to really have a go at it and try it. So, how do we encourage and support independent writing with these students? We allow them, as I mentioned, to self-select photos. So often because we don't know what they might be communicating about, having photos as a context is helpful. We, again, we let them have a go and just have a discussion later about any spelling conventions that maybe they're missing or that we need to give them a little bit more instruction. But for independent writing, we just want them to try. We don't want to write it down for them um, because students aren't going to learn from copying, as we've already talked about. This is not an effective way of instructing students as far as independent writing goes. Um, we can have them create their message though on a speech generating device or an augmentative communication device, maybe to describe a picture. But then we want to delete that message or take it away because again, we don't want them copying the words. We want to see what they can generate on their own. They might need a reminder, which is okay. We might just repeat the message again on their speech device, um, or they can replay it if they need to have another example of what they were intending to say about that picture. Um, we would tell them to write down every sound that you think you hear in the words that you want to write. So they really need to have daily practice at writing something, all of our students with complex needs. And they need to do the whole process. They need to come up with the content. They need to be able to write all the sounds that they can hear and then publish it. For example, sending a text to their grandma. Um, we do want to talk a little bit about using hand over hand for writing, and it's really not encouraged. Again, just to respect body autonomy, we don't really encourage hand over hand when with writing. But we have talked about in our previous presentations about a strategy called hop on my hand, where it's more of a hand under hand approach, and we invite the student to put their hand on top of ours while we are demonstrating some writing. We can also encourage them to write and then show them how we would write it by saying, now let me show you how I would write it, and use the same kind of tool that the student was using to do their writing. So we really want to provide informative feedback as well. So by celebrating their successes, I like how you wrote your name. Let me show you how I would write your name. And then you can show them how you would write it. Or look, you used the M and an L, and so did I when I wrote the word Molly. We don't want to interpret by translating what we think they are saying and assuming um, that we know what they're writing. What we want to do is describe what we see them doing, and then also show them how we might write the same thing, and really connecting the print to things that the student knows. Back to you, Donna, I think.
Thanks, Chris. So, both independent and during independent writing opportunities, some students may need to use different tools to write, both at the emergent or the conventional level. We call these different tools alternative pencils. This just means providing a way for students with significant disabilities to generate print by selecting or writing letters from the whole alphabet. And it doesn't really mean that it's an actual thing that you hold in your hand. Alternative pencils are anything that can provide the student to have access to all 26 letters of the alphabet. We need to use the pencil that takes the least amount of brain effort, brain power, the least amount of energy needed for the student to form the writing, so the student has more energy and brain power available to focus on the function of their writing, why they are writing. You should also consider the tool that has the most potential to develop, even if the movements are limited or unreliable at first. Remember, the only way to improve in writing is to write. Early writing is a perfect way to work on motor skills and letter knowledge, but you should always ask yourself, what is the opportunity I'm trying to provide for this student? Not what is the skill I want the child to practice. So again, it's about writing independently, not practicing better letter formation. It is important, as Chris mentioned, to recognize the stages of writing and communicating so that you can begin to foster the development, the next step. Just as young children start with exploration and drawing and scribbling, and then maybe getting a few recognizable letters or some invented spelling before their writing looks more like adult writing, users of alternative pencils will also go through these kinds of stages. They may start by just exploring it. They may choose random letters. They may not understand that there needs to be a space between letters and words. So again, we use the same strategies as Chris indicated. You don't attribute meaning, but you provide that informative feedback and demonstrate and show them how they could do it. You can also use recordable messages so students can read their work. So if you have a big macro step by step and the student makes a selection of letters, you could record those letters exactly the way the student wrote them, like LCBMSDE, and then have the recordable message. They could tap it for them to read what they have written. The next slides show you some examples of alternative pencils, eye gaze frames, an alphabet board, or flip charts. Students can choose the letters that they want, either by using partner-assisted writing, choosing them directly, and or helping them by assisting them to write down the words that they've selected. These are some examples of alphabet boards and flip charts. Some students may be able to physically point to letters using an alphabet board or even manipulate magnetic letters. As long as they have all 26 letters, that's an okay writing tool. But they might need a partner to assist them by scribing if they're just pointing on an alphabet board. Some students may be able to use a keyboard to type the text rather than using a pen or pencil that requires more refined motor skills. Large or differently colored keyboards can be used for some students. Flipbooks can also be used, again with a communication partner, for students who do not have the motor skills to use a traditional pencil or a keyboard or to point to specific letters. For these kinds of alternative pencils, like the ones on the top left and the far right, the letters are presented to the student, and then they select the ones they want using whatever way they can to indicate their choice. They might use a head movement, they might use a switch, they might use their augmentative communication device. You may need to work on getting a better kind of yes/no response, like, yes, that's the one I'm selecting. No, go to the next one. Because in the flip books, generally, the adult will present all the letters to the student one at a time. So do you want A? No. Do you want B? No. Do you want C? No. Do you want D? Yes, that's the letter that I want to write my name, Donna. So it's important that you allow that student the means to indicate their yes and their no. It's also important to let the student determine when they want to insert a space or if they've made a mistake and when they are all finished, so you can actually know what their writing is. This type of writing takes a lot more time and a partner is needed, but it is so important for all of our students to be able to express their thoughts in writing. This next slide shows examples of eye gaze frames. In this case, the students use their eye gaze to first select the area of the letter they want, and then to refine it for the specific letter. For example, using the eye gaze frame that's on the right-hand side of your screen, if I was the student and I wanted to select the letter M, I would first look at the box in the top right, the one that has MNOPQR. And then I would look at the box on the left, which is a purple shaded box. That shows my partner that I'm indicating I want the purple letter from the top right box. That's the M. Again, you will have to determine for your student what the best yes and no, meaning that's the one I want, or no, that's not the one I want. Sometimes eye gaze can be very subtle and very hard to follow. So that's why we often will use eye gaze frames with a hole cut in the middle or a plexiglass frame, because you need to be across from the student so you can look and see where their eyes are going. The example on the left of the screen shows how a student could add a space or indicate when they're finished making a word. It's hard to see, but there's a little tiny space in the middle, and the star, I think, indicates that I'm finished. There's also an eye gaze frame behind me, if you can see it a little bit, that just is made out of PVC pipe and has, again, the letters are spaced around the frame, and the student can just look and find the one they want. It's important to remember, though, that students do not need to demonstrate the physical ability to select the letter or to know their letters or even know their colors in order to start using alternative pencils. They learn about them by using them. At first, the selections will be random, and that's okay. You might have to just sort of attribute a little bit of meaning, like, I see your eyes are going over here. You probably want something from this box. And the partner just scribes it and writes it down. And again, it's probably going to be a random string of letters at first. But again, you provide that informative feedback and demonstration. You're not saying, oh, I bet you're writing mom, but you might say, maybe you're writing about mom because I see you picked an M. Or maybe you looked at this box and you chose a D. I wonder if you're talking about your dog. So using things like maybe and I wonder. And again, as we indicated before, you can record the letters that they wrote on a recordable message device so they can read or say what they have written. Talk to your SLP and your OT for students that need different access to the alphabet in order to find the right tool that works. Different students will have different needs, so there's not just one alternative pencil. You might need to use different colors or different shading or a black background or for students with cortical visual difficulties. So there's lots of different alternatives. We also have some handouts in our PD session, or if you talk to one of us, we can send you some more information on modules about learning about alternative pencils and some more examples.
So let's just talk a little bit about creating some opportunities for some independent writing. So we've talked a lot about modeling, that they need to be able to observe someone modeling writing in these meaningful social interactions, and we need to be able to create these opportunities. So here's some examples on this slide of some writing opportunities. We talk a lot about signing their name for a real purpose. It can be really motivating to have students independently sign their name for a purpose, such as on their artwork, as a reminder note to family members, or maybe on a birthday card or other special occasion card. So if they use an alternative pencil, we can record exactly what they choose, as Donna has described. We don't give a model of the student's name for the student to copy, but we make sure that there have been lots of opportunities for them to write their name already throughout the day, and that we are also providing examples of how we would write their name so that they can see what it looks like. We talk about sign in, sign up, and sign out. So these are ways of practicing writing their name that incorporate real and naturally occurring and meaningful reasons for students to write their name. And they could be things like every time they leave the classroom, they have to sign out. Every time they return, they sign in. Lots and lots of opportunities for students to write their names in for a meaningful context. The magnifying glass on the slide here just reminds us about something, that an opportunity called alphabet scavenger hunt. So the student picks a letter, selects a letter, and then has to find something in the room that begins with that letter. The student can then write down the things they find and talk about them as well. Another opportunity is something called words, about things I know. So again, the student picks a letter, and then together you make a list of words that begin with that letter or sound, and that are related to things that the student knows. So we can write them down and then talk about that. It can be really motivating to select actions, pictures, and foods that the student is familiar with. And then later we can create a short book about the things that we talk about the words that we have talked about. Tongue twisters. The student can pick a letter and then we make up a short tongue twister using that letter. We can write it down and talk about it. And we can also use a text-to-speech function on a device so that the student can read the tongue twister aloud, or record it on a message button if we want to. Also a reminder on this slide, you'll see Wheel of Fortune or Hangman, which everybody knows the rules for. So we would think of a short word or phrase that the student is familiar with, and maybe give them some clues like the category, and the student can choose letters either self-selecting or partner assisted or using an alternative pencil to try to guess the word or phrase. And you can even add some fun sound effects if you like from the web for Wheel of Fortune. We can also write picture captions. So we offer the students pictures such as favorite photos from a family album or pictures from a magazine or a book, and ask the student to write about it. And we don't expect them to just automatically be able to write words or correct sentences. But as they get started, they're likely to select random letters that might be difficult for us to relate to the photo or the picture selected. But we want to, again, presume competence and give them those opportunities. We could get them to help compose a text message or an email to a family member. We could also, example on the slide here, writing in a journal. Most typical early writers experience writing in a journal, so they often draw a picture and write about it. And this often begins well before they can actually spell words or write letters accurately. So the same activity can be modified for our students with significant disabilities. We can help them find a picture, and then again, maybe we need to experiment with an alternative pencil to help them write about it. And I think I'm back to you now, Donna.
Great, thanks, Chris. The app Write About is also one that's on the SIA iPads, and it provides some prompts that you might even want to use just the pictures for it, and as a starter for some ideas. This is just an example from one of my high school students who is learning to write his name. His educators were having him complete the same literacy sheets every day, and he was essentially like making marks, as you can see on the paper. He knew he had to fill in some parts of this sheet. There's maybe a little squiggle here that could be an M, but I think that's a bit of a stretch. But his goal was just make the marks, get through, go to the next page. So one day I used this strategy of, oh, I like the way you wrote your name. Let me show you how I would write your name. And I just wrote his name beside it. Well, now, a few months later, his writing has improved so much that he's now using his first name and his last name, and he's better at using some of the other words like the date of his birthday. So it's just a nice example, I think, to show you how presuming potential and having high expectations can have an impact. This young man had been writing, his same worksheet for quite a long time, and just sort of doing the task. But once we started expecting more, he showed us more, and his printing is so much more legible. I think the next step for him is to be doing some of the other writing opportunities like Chris mentioned, getting him to write for more independent reasons and understanding why it's important to write his name, not just to complete the task. But we're very excited about his writing. And then we just included this sheet as a good tool that you can use to monitor your progress in supporting independent writing in students. It's a self-reflection tool to help guide you think about how you're doing. So it might be questions like, do the students have access to their personal communication system? Do they select their own topic? Do they communicate about that topic? And do they have a way of putting those communication ideas into writing? We've included a QR code, but you can also contact us to get this PDF or a Word document. There's a bunch of other literacy self-reflections in this link as well. It's from the Project Core website under Teaching Supports and Implementation. and instructional planning and reflection. So lots of the topics that we've talked about in our Let's Talk About Tuesdays are covered there. So again, we encourage you to check out the SLP SharePoint complex communication section for more information on literacy. And there's 2 additional QR codes here, one for the dynamic learning maps modules for writing. There is one on emergent writing and predictable chart writing, like we mentioned in one of our previous talks, but also there's one on alternative pencils. And there are lots more modules for more conventional writers. So things like narrative writing or persuasive writing or writing for information or producing writing. So I'd encourage you to check those out for more ideas. The other QR code provides some video examples of alternative pencils like the ones we use today being used with students. And I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think that we are finished for today, and we hope to see you in one of our future Let's Talk About sessions. If you have any questions, you can contact Chris or myself or your speech path that's in your school.
Thank you.
Bye.